Give me the word when you're ready to.
Whenever you're ready, Your Worship.
Okay. He's ready. Are you ready? Just give me a moment.
Yeah. That's what I'm with today with 2222.
You in yet? Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of council to order, dated Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022. We'd like to begin this evening by acknowledging that we're gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inkla-Katmuk and Silt people. And again, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. There's one late item that we need a motion to add as a late item. It's Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. It's Emergency Operations Centers and Training. I need a mover and a seconder. Christopherson and Luck. And we'll add it as 9.5. All in favor? Opposed, none. That is unanimous. Public input. 2-minute session for public input. This is not the presentation for the Theatre Society, but anybody that has any agenda item they wish to speak to. Nobody has signed up for that. Okay, moving right along. 4.1, I need a mover that the minutes of the regular council meeting held February 8th, 2022 be adopted.
So moved. Second.
White and Etchart. And any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, none. That too is carried. There is no public hearing. And that brings us to the delegation for the Nicola Valley Theatre Society. Councillor Christopherson,
I'll need to step aside for this presentation.
do you want to just put that on mic?
I'll need to step aside for this presentation as I'm the director of the society.
Thank you. And Mr. Hudson?
I'll come get you, Gary.
Mr. Smith, can you please? Thank you.
So I'm not changing the slides from here, you guys.
Just tell me what you'd like to advance.
Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you for hearing us tonight. My name is Rich Hodson. I'm a director.
Can I stop you for a
Yes.
moment, Rick? I think we need the mic set.
Should be good, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rich Hodson. I'm a director of the Nicola Valley Community Theatre today. And with me are a few other directors, Dr. Margaret Carlson, David Brown, and Richard Jackson Jr. And two
Can
more
I-
of our directors couldn't come tonight.
Thank you. Can I stop you once again? I don't know that he's coming through for the online
It's
crowd.
working online, Your Worship.
Pardon me?
I can confirm that it's definitely working online,
Okay.
Your Worship. I'm not sure how well the microphone there isn't tied into the speakers in front of you anymore. It should be coming out through the ceiling.
Okay.
Should
So
be.
we're having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. If you can,
Okay, I'll speak a little louder.
that's better.
Okay, so
Or
let's
even
go.
shouting would be good.
Let's go to the next slide, and we'll give you a very quick update on Nicola Valley Community Theatre to date. We purchased the land for about $200,000 in 2014. We've got about 600 members. Our funding applications and donations have been successful up to about $1.3 million. 3 recent applications to BC Infrastructure Fund have been rejected because of a lack of a major partner. And so let's go to the next slide. And so we explored partnerships. We reached out to existing theater companies, which is the May Theater Company that's in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Castlegar. And they We're a little bit interested, but not enough to come up with a worthwhile proposal. We've offered a partnership to one of the First Nation bands, and neither of those two offers were taken up. Next slide. So it's time to revisit and revise our plans. It's now obvious to us that infrastructure funding for our existing model is not going to work. The original intent of Nicola Valley Community Theatre was to build a performing arts theatre for the community. The City of Merritt is lacking a major convention center, and what we'd like to do is work with the City of Merritt to deliver a performing arts theatre / convention center. Next slide. So moving forward, we would like to act as an advisor to the City of Merritt to build a performing arts theatre, and we'd have to explore the options of how that would work and conditions of employment, I guess. So this would meet the needs of the City of Merritt to have a full convention center. The performing arts theatre could also provide a venue for live music and theatre performances and have movie showing capabilities as well. Next slide. So economic development, Stephanie, listen to this one. On a recent trip to Newfoundland, we were told the story of the revitalization of the Newfoundland economy. When the federal government put a halt to the cod fishery, their economy floundered. They reinvented their economy through arts and culture. Today, tourists flock to Newfoundland to experience the music and arts and culture tours, and the economy thrives. In fact, my wife and I are probably going on our second trip soon. So, tourism, hotels, restaurants, and economy will thrive once the City of Merritt embraces arts and culture. So, actions that need to be undertaken is we have to sell our land, like those 4 lots that are, I think, quite valuable over by the mall. And our funding of $1.3 million raised would be donated to the city for the purposes of providing a nest egg to get the performing arts theatre project started. Engineering studies for attaching the performing arts theatre to the present civic center may have to be undertaken by the city with funds from Nicola Valley Community Theatre. The second part would undertake architectural drawings, and the Rebel prepare an application, and could work with the city on this to Infrastructure Canada, and the Revelstoke Performing Arts Theatre can be used as a project model, except they've got 14 seats in a row with no row down the middle for old guys like me that might have to get up. So, next slide. So, actions requests of the council. 1, does council support Nicola Valley Community Theatre's request to examine the feasibility of an annex to the Civic Center to accommodate a performing arts venue? We're prepared to fund an engineering study. Second one, does council wish Nicola Valley Community Theatre to work with the city in an advisory capacity to achieve a performing arts theatre as part of a broader vision to transfer the Civic Center into a convention center? And the third one is Nicola Valley Community Theatre property at the corner of Cooley and Garcia, 4 city lots, will be put up for sale. Is council interested in purchasing the property before it's put on the market? And the proposed project, the total cost of the project can be estimated once the design and engineering studies have been undertaken, and we've been through this with the other projects, so we're pretty sure that that's where the cost structure comes in. Seating could be variable, but 275 to 350 seats. Nicola Valley Community Theatre will donate to the City of Merritt all assets of approximately $1.3 million raised to date. Nicola Valley Community Theatre would like to support the City of Merritt to prepare infrastructure applications to raise additional funds. And we believe there are several individual organizations and companies in the community that we've talked to that would support the project with donations. So next steps. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Are there questions, and can I clarify our situation here. We don't want to get into the debate here at this meeting. We want to maybe put a, Mr. Lois?
If I can assist from the procedure bylaw on this issue, Your Worship. So this is section 31 that deals with how delegations are handled, and so this you've quite properly requested to appear and make a request, which has been done. And so under section F of that bylaw, delegations may make a request of council, which you have done. If they do this, this request will be considered at the next meeting that is scheduled at the time the request is made, unless those present unanimously vote to consider it immediately. So if it was an urgent item, then we would potentially go for a unanimous vote to look at that. But as a general rule, we would be looking at placing this to be discussed on the March the 8th meeting, which is the next scheduled meeting.
So we don't even need a motion to have it put on the March 8th meeting?
No, Your Worship, it would appear as
But
unfinished business.
there are questions that council can ask.
Absolutely.
And now is the time for that. Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have a question. Our slide goes back up here a little bit, something about if we were to build it, of course, then if we build it, the city takes it over and everything, that means more staff and that kind of thing in the city here. And as you know, with the floods and everything, we're struggling a little bit. There's going to be a lot of infrastructure to rebuild here. Would the society be interested in forming a partnership? Just questions, okay? A partnership where if the city built this and was responsible for the structure itself, the capital cost, would the society be at all interested in running the facility? If that's feasible, of course.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I guess where I come from, we thought this was a city project that we would help get it kick-started and help to build it. It's a city property, and but we could entertain that thought.
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible or not. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Arts Council now, right? So that side of the organization is all glued into us pretty well.
Yeah, I'm just asking questions. It might be jurisdictional issues and things like that.
Well, the reason I mentioned it is because that memorandum says that we, Nicola Valley Community Theatre, will build the facility and they will run it. They will bring the people here. So that sort of was the intent of it. That's not specific like that.
Okay. I have one other question. A theater like this is usually got a lot of people, young people and everything. And do you have a lot of young people on your board? Because, as you know, a lot of these facilities, we need the young people involved in here to really show enthusiasm and things for moving forward, right? So do
You look pretty young to me.
Oh, sorry, younger people. You know what I mean?
At the present time, we don't, but that doesn't preclude us getting a youth organization involved in it. I mean, you see the effect of a community theater in places like Vernon is just absolutely wonderful, right? And it brings the dollars in, the tourists, the buses. It's wonderful.
Okay, good, thank you.
Councillor Richard? Oh,
So I know that before when we had looked at different plans, within your study, do you think any of your old information, that old design could be used here?
Well, the one thing and that's why we stressed an engineering study is one of the diagrams we have is where the theater complex actually fits inside the old civic center. So the wall is opened up, and in order to get to that point to say this is possible or not, we need a structural engineer to look at that. So if he comes back and says, yes, this is possible, and this is how you do it, then we go to the next step of getting an architect involved in it. So, and that's why I said, like, who's going to do the work and the responsibilities. I sort of see us as being helpers to the city.
Yeah, it's always interesting to look at our plans because you never know what kind of revenue streams could come and help fund a project like this.
Yeah. We have access to a fellow by the name of Richard Chick, who has worked on every major or most major theaters in Canada, and he is so excited that the city might be considering this. So we have him at our disposal, and he brings an architect with him that has designed balconies and a lot of theaters. So
Definitely interesting to see. Thank you.
Excuse me, Councillor White.
The problem I have with it being attached,
Is there a question?
yeah,
We're debating
okay,
at
well,
another time.
yeah, my question is, well, I don't know how to word it, but the seating. The Civic Center has 300 seats right now, and all we're really adding here is another 300 seats. I don't think that that's looking too far down the road. Once Merritt gets back on its feet and population grows, then we're stuck with 600 seats basically for a convention center.
can I respond to that?
Mhm.
The 300 seats that you talk about are not enjoyable seats. They're not worth going to watch a play or music or anything, because you're sitting on a hard seat looking up like this, and by the time about half an hour has gone through, you're ready to leave, right? So that's not, I wouldn't consider that part of the application. But the other part that reminds me that I should sort of mention is that the reason that we're looking at making it close to or attached to the Civic Center is all of the washrooms of the facility will be used for the theater, all of the cooking facilities can be used for the theater, and all of the meeting rooms. So what you're doing is you're sort of making those facilities that are in the Civic Center useful, and so that you get a much reduced cost on the cost of this convention center, because half of it's there already. You're just given the auditorium with a stage and that. So it's a really important part of the conversation.
It definitely is, because I don't understand it.
Well, but
I don't understand how you're going to have a dinner in a theater.
well, the two buildings will be either really close to each other or joined by a walkway. So the people that are in the theater will use the washrooms in the Civic Center. If it's a convention center, they will walk to their meeting rooms and then come back to the big hall again. So they'll be in the same proximity that all the Civic Center stuff will be used by the theater.
But that's still not increasing the capacity for the, what's my word?
Convention.
For the convention center.
Well, so what you're doing is you've got some of the facilities that are already there that a normal standalone theater would have. You've got the washrooms, you've got the meeting rooms, you've got the cooking facilities. So all we have to do is get the other building close enough in a walkway so you walk in or you walk out into the other building.
I get that. I'm talking about seats for a convention center. If you want to bring a convention here and need 600 seats, you can't use those seats in the theater.
Oh, absolutely you can, yes. That's one of the purposes of that theater, is people like, say, the City of Merritt or whoever gets up and talks or does a presentation, it's in the theater.
But that's where you're going to eat your dinner as well?
Well, no, you'd go back out to the Civic Center if you've got a meal planned.
But that's what I'm saying, the Civic Center only holds 300 people.
Mr. Smith? Thank you. Councillor White.
So I really do want to let council know that we can do some work to bring forward some additional information when this comes forward the next time, because the Theatre Society has had some preliminary discussions with staff just to say, okay, what might be theoretically possible if this were even explored. And so here we're looking at the bird's eye view of the Civic Center as a whole, and then if you can just move it a tiny bit more towards City Hall as well, Greg, so you can see that. So if you were to take, I'm actually going to, people online won't hear this, but if you were to take some portion of this and say, if you can envision this spot right here, there's a divider under there right now, and this is the highest portion of the roof. So if this were, say, stage, and then this were built up and had maybe 2 floors of seats that we're looking down on that. So you've got stage seating right here. You don't actually cut out all that much parking from this area versus if you actually go out the other way. And then dinner or meal could potentially still happen in the main auditorium. There's lots of different permutations as to what or how it could look, but it would be theoretically possible, and certainly an architect or others would be able to design this with an eye of having costs as low as possible while still retaining as much parking and other things, because I think council's raised that concern historically. So it might be possible to look at, and that's something that we can bring forward to you with a bit more information at the next meeting.
I was going to ask that question. If you could bring that kind of information to the next meeting, that would be great. The one question I had is, as part of that 1.3 million, does that include the 500 that we have on our own books?
Yes, it
Okay.
does, to my knowledge. Yes.
And, sorry, I didn't hear. Did you have something to say?
Is that include the cost of the land? Oh, sorry. Sorry, just going on from what you said, does that also include the cost of the land, the sale of the land? Do you have an idea what that's worth right now? Sorry for this.
That
That's
one
my question.
actually includes the cost of, or the benefit from the land. Right?
Sale price of the land?
It includes what we paid for, it includes the 200,000, and I would think that perhaps we could, if we sold it, it would get more than that, so 1.3 million plus.
Yeah, okay, yeah, good, clear. That's,
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for your presentation. We will have this on the next agenda with a staff report. And is that doable with staff? Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your attention and all good questions. So,
Thank you for your presentation. Can somebody let Councillor Christopherson back in, please? Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And everybody.
One in and 5 out. It's kind of uneven.
I have that effect on people.
6 out. Should that door be open? Thank you. So back to the agenda, unfinished business, 7.1, SILGA motions. Mr. Lewis, can you just remind us what you're needing?
Absolutely, Your Worship. So at the February 8th meeting of Council, we asked you to consider your desires for any motions to go to SILGA, should you have any. As a reminder, the intention behind these, or the requirement for valid SILGA motions, is that they have to refer to a regional or an issue which is greater than just our single municipality. So what you did last year was make 2 requests on changing provincial regulations for snow handling. So whether or not you have any proposals this year, they would need to be approved at this meeting, since the deadline to submit any motions for SILGA is tomorrow. At the time we dispatched the agenda, no proposed motions have been presented to staff, so I don't know if any of you have any proposals that you would like to either propose now or discuss or debate or brainstorm in any way.
Councillor Luck?
thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to bring back the one for the snow removal. We didn't have the luxury of having an in-person SILGA last year, but this way I think if with an in-person SILGA, we might be able to, as a council staff, be able to talk to the motion. So it might be worthwhile at this particular time. Maybe even the other motion we have on the table too, that's still important. Let's just bring those 2 motions back to the table and take it to SILGA. Would that work?
Just pulling up the text, Councillor.
I was going to say, I think the one that was not moved at SILGA maybe didn't represent well enough the idea that we were looking at.
Yeah, I think you always get a better chance to, Mayor, if you can actually stand up to speak to those motions as well. I always find those ones seem to move a little bit quicker than ones that nobody speaks to, so it's just an idea. At least we got something there than nothing. Something's better than nothing.
So of these are the two resolutions that you submitted last year. Of those, the provincial maintenance of arterial roads within municipalities with the amendment to local governments instead of simply municipalities, that was endorsed by first SILGA and then UBCM. And then the second one, the use of all-terrain vehicles using snow events, requesting alterations to the Motor Vehicle Act in order to enable people to lawfully use ATVs to clear snow, and that was not endorsed by SILGA, and so didn't proceed any further.
If there is a will to put this back to SILGA, can we rework some of the wording?
We can rework things, Your Worship, but that would need to be done tonight because the deadline for submission is tomorrow and they require a resolution of support at the time the submission is made.
Councillor Enter?
I'm almost wondering about the use of the all-terrain vehicles if it didn't get support from SILGA, because you'd have to have ICBC and other things involved with that, because sometimes some people, you don't necessarily get asked for your driver's license when you get pulled over for your ATV, and there could be issues with insurance, so I wonder if that's maybe why they didn't support that one. So that could be a little bit more of an insurance challenge, but I think it's a good one, and I think it would be effective for people in town, but I just wonder if that's maybe why that didn't get supported so bad.
I'm going to go to Mr. Smith.
There may be a middle ground for this resolution, Your Worship. Here, the ask was to modify the Motor Vehicle Act, whereas it could be that SILGA or UBCM work with, ultimately it's the RCMP that administer the exemptions for this. Because if there was a program by which RCMP was comfortable giving exemptions, the framework actually already exists. It's just that is not kind of a valid purpose from the RCMP perspective to give an exemption. So I'm trying to think of exactly what the wording might be, but it would be provincial government to review the process for giving exemptions for the purpose of allowing operation of all-terrain vehicles solely for the purpose of clearing snow during snow events or something to that effect.
Within a prescribed area is most likely what they do on the permits currently.
There you go.
Because if it's done in an agricultural purpose for weed control and whatnot, there's a permission form. I think it's the MV 1815 or something. But the point is that it exists, and it's normally for an agricultural, industrial purpose, that it does exist. Just a thought.
It's just a smaller ask than saying change the legislation.
So these were the SILGA's comments in the resolution book last year. So it has not previously considered a resolution, which does mean that any resubmission would be running up against the issue that it had at that point, or SILGA would have considered a resolution on this topic. What did they say? Provincial Ministry indicated it was investigating whether or not possible for ICBC to develop new basic insurance. Suggested we should use UBCM's ORV local government working group to communicate. So they did have some issues about the mechanics of it.
Councillor White?
Well, I just noticed over the last snow that we've had that there was a number of ATVs out there plowing sidewalks and plowing seniors' homes, yards and whatnot, so we should figure something out.
Councillor Christopherson?
My question is on the first resolution, so I can wait for the debate on this one to finish.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything else? Are we okay so far with some of the gathered new information? If we have sidewalks plowed, would they be able to go down a sidewalk? They wouldn't be able to go down a sidewalk either, would they?
RCMP has. I'm not allowed to say this out loud.
Councillor White may have seen people using ATVs on their municipal and roadways and sidewalks. I can personally say I didn't see a single one, although I may have heard quite a lot of engine noise.
Yeah, they were well aware. I think the issue was they didn't want them scooting all across town, but if they're kind of working in their neighborhood, yeah.
They were working in their
There was
neighborhood.
not a whole lot of concern with that from, yeah, anyways.
Okay. Are we looking at bringing this one back with the revised commentary? All in favor?
That's
Opposed?
had it been moved or seconded?
Oh, we went to.
Oh, you're gonna make us do that? Okay. I need a mover.
I'll move it.
A second.
And Councillor Fair, you haven't had a chance to speak yet.
I was just looking for a little more clarity on what was happening with Flynn Road there. It sounded like it has been asked of Flynn Road to investigate, but I didn't get all the detail there.
So Greg, you need you to read.
Yep, so what I just pulled up was the resolution at the time. So this is the B121 2019 resolution. That was noting the Off-Road Vehicle Act was intended to create safe, convenient, incidental access to public roads and highways to better connect BC's rural communities, to support a first-rate ORV trail network, and it requested that only one permit be required for approved access to jurisdictions, that permits be issued by RCMP or local government along designated routes, and permits be extended from 2 to 5 years. And so that was a different topic on this, but it was about the use of ORVs. And the Flynn Road response was to say that they are currently seeking reports from other ministries responsible for the Motor Vehicle Act, ICBC and policing services in order to further amend the MVAR, specifically looking at improving incidental access to highways. So that's incidental access, whereas you're looking at dedicated specific access. And also seeking support for ICBC to develop a new basic insurance product to support increased access to municipal streets. This would require select rural communities to be designated pilot projects similar to golf carts in Chase. So that section 2 that they were responding to in 2019 sounds almost identical. We would like to be a pilot community for snow clearing in that instance.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing we need to ask for as well is for a designated population. We're not doing it for everybody. We're doing it for our seniors and most vulnerable and disabled population. Right?
Right.
Okay.
Well,
The issue is that for being a SILGA resolution, in general, that may be the landing spot for like legislation, but the more prescriptive we get in saying, like, I don't know, this is only for somebody who is under a certain age, serving for, I don't know,
I don't know that we're
just
looking at
messy.
under a certain age, but I think that was the purpose of the program, was to look at helping with the Snow Angels program, and I think that actually wasn't clarified enough at the SILGA convention for some of them that were there, from what I understand. So had we have said something like that, it may have made a difference, but we didn't talk about the population at all in our commentary. Councillor Luck.
Oh, sorry, I was going to move the motion for it when I had it on, sorry.
Do we have it moved?
Yeah, we moved it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we moved it. Now we need to, yay.
Councillor Edger?
I think with this motion, because amending the Motor Vehicle Act is a big undertaking, but if it was something where it was the permit issued by the detachment, there's some level of control. Typically, the permits are, I believe, annual, and it's for industrial use. So if the permit was allowed for snow clearing, the permits that are issued currently are very specific to which areas and streets. So if a person is going to operate within their neighborhood for the purposes of snow clearing, that can be put on the permit currently, but for purposes of weed control and things of that nature. So maybe it's possible to lobby to ICBC and other government or other departments, but it would take time, obviously. But it's not impossible. I just think that the limit of 1 year might be something on the permit. It could be less, I don't know.
Okay, seeing no other hands, I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Are you opposed, Kurt?
No.
Okay.
I was just.
Opposed? None.
We will wordsmith that one appropriately prior to submission to our worship.
Thank you. And Councillor Christopherson?
Yeah, I was wanting to revisit the one about the highways. Our other submission from last year, just to see what the wording was, because I think we're still concerned a great deal about the Nicola Avenue and then coming up Oak Street, and so how is that worded there?
About working closely with municipalities to identify any flaws or deficiencies in snow clearing. And that was what we were looking at, to try to get, basically try to get some participation in a contract that doesn't have that criteria stated.
Yeah, I'm not sure our wording was something that would help us to have some kind of a resolution, but we still have the standoff between the highways and our municipality as far as, especially with Nicola Avenue, of how to proceed. And I'm not sure that the way the motion is worded there is specific enough to do what we want.
Wasn't that one approved at UBCM?
So, yeah, so this was first endorsed by SILGA and then at UBCM, so it has passed and is adopted policy at this point. I think the biggest problem with it in terms of specificity is that this motion calls to identify problems and relay expectations that reasonable requests be heeded, which is somewhat vague. The problem is the contracts already exist and those set the service standards that they currently have to abide by, and they're fairly long contracts. So at this point, all we can really do is ask them nicely.
Fairly long contracts that are renewable.
Yeah, and so it's not really accomplishing what we're wanting to do. And I'm just wondering whether we need to look at it from a different direction, because there must be some ways that is it possible for the municipality to have that portion of the contract taken upon ourselves and taken out of their contract. I don't know how you would word it in a SILGA motion, but we seem to have been at a stalemate for at least 20 years as to particularly the Nicola Avenue problem, and I'm still not really clear about what section of Oak Street is considered highways and what section is considered city.
I thought the whole thing was considered provincial.
No, Oak Street.
Nicola, we're talking Nicola.
Nicola is, but there's a section of Boat Street that I think is under city action now, is it not?
Boat's all city.
All city except for the section between the off-ramp and the on-ramp at exit 292.
So from the Nicola Boat intersection, Boat Street, until it gets up to the overpass, is under city jurisdiction, and we do a pretty good job there. You hardly ever hear of complaints. Mind you, there's no real problem areas there. But Nicola Avenue is under the provincial part, and it causes a lot of grief. Because the plows dump it back onto the sidewalks, and the sidewalks clear it off, as per city bylaw, and then the trucks come along and they shove it back on the sidewalks, and it's ad infinitum, and somehow we have to address that situation. And I don't know whether that particular motion addresses it. And we're not the only community that's caught in that. Salmon Arm has the highway going right through the middle of it, and parts of Kamloops have that, and parts of the Okanagan. So can we touch that up, or is it a lost cause?
I think at this point, we don't have enough time to touch it up, seeing as how these are due today. But if we can work on this afterwards and get it touched up for the following year. Mr. Smith?
I think just the way SILGA and then UBCM tends to run these, anything that is a substantially similar resolution, they'll end up just saying, hey, we passed a resolution on this in 2019 or 2020. And so I think anything that you were to do on this front, that again was also going to be generally applicable, because it has to be applicable broadly,
Yeah.
I think you're not going to be able to make this different enough to tackle our particular situation and also have it considered independently. I think that, again, there are still opportunities and avenues to address this. The challenge continues to be, it doesn't happen unless other parties are willing to spend more than they currently are. Like, they keep saying, well, it's not in our, like, this literally isn't in our agreement. Here's what we did. Here's what we had agreed to do for what we were going to get paid. And provincial government, well, this is what we said we're going to pay, and that's what our budget is. And the local government says, but it's not our responsibility. And we literally go around.
That's why I'm asking whether this municipality can have the contract, get paid for it, and have it removed from the other body, and is there a sufficient way that we can have that section removed from their contract and contracted to the city?
It's not even in there. Oh, you mean the whole
The
Nicola Road?
Nicola Avenue, the section that's within our municipality, can we somehow bring it under our control so that we have that portion of the contract taken out of their contract and put into ours? Is there enough monies involved that we're not going to break the bank by doing it ourselves? And that's originally why it came about. Oh, ministry will do it, we don't have to pay for it, but it's not working.
And the ministry isn't doing it. I hear you. I don't believe it's a SILGA UBCM issue, and if we want to talk about that at another time, I think it's worthwhile talking about. But I don't think it's this time for UBCM to have it done by tonight. But I hear what you're saying, and I actually like what you're saying.
I have asked before.
So we will try to make sure we set some time aside at some point in the future to talk about snow removal on Nicola.
The only problem with that is it puts it off for yet another year, and the businesses along Nicola Avenue.
Well, it may not go to SILGA or to UBCM, it may just be a negotiated piece for that alone. That's what I was thinking.
Okay, that I could.
I can't see bringing it to UBCM, but I can see talking to the ministry about it and saying, are you looking at maybe adjusting this? I don't know.
Okay, for what it's worth, Councillor Christopherson through the mayor, last year one of the things we explicitly requested from the UBCM calls was to talk with Modi about this and other things, and obviously every year we asked to talk to Modi. Sadly last year they denied us an audience, but we will again try again this year. So this will definitely be something that we'll be trying to bring up again.
Maybe we could organize a truck convoy.
Or I was thinking maybe a car convoy, just going down and speaking to them.
Or grandma's out with their walkers. We'll have a grandma convoy.
I've seen a number of walkers along Nicola Avenue during heavy snow dumps, and it's worrisome.
It is.
I agree. It's a worthwhile topic to bring in the future. Can I ask Mr. Smith to put that on your to-do list?
You absolutely can. I just would like to clarify one point. You are wanting to deal with this at the elected official level, or are you wanting staff to have, again, more ministerial discussions and reporting back? You're wanting the opportunity to advocate that municipalities should be able to take over contracts
Yep.
for maintenance of highways in their jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Yeah, at a reduced cost. And have our money come back. That was not just,
Yeah, I think
That may
province
be a
obviously
different-
isn't going to love the economies of scale argument. They're still going to need to hire the person to go here who has to raise their blades in order to go there. But anyways, I don't love it if I'm the province, but I totally get it from our perspective. So let's have the conversation.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And where are we now on the motions? We've already moved the ATM? ATV? ATM. We're moving the ATM. Are there any other motions for SILGA? Okay. Thank you. So there are no bylaws. We have new business, 9.1, MFA financing, 2022 Freightliner dump truck, Mr. Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. These next two items on the agenda here are a little bit of housekeeping from the 2021 financial plan. On that plan, we had two items that required short-term borrowing, equipment financing. One of them was the 2022 Freightliner dump truck, and the other one was a Hydrovac unit as well. So first off, with the dump truck, $285,000 to be borrowed from Municipal Finance Authority, paid back within 5 years. This truck was to replace the existing 2002 dump truck, which was nearing the end of its life. We had budgeted $285,000 net of a trade-in. The cost of the dump truck was $291,209.32, and we did not exercise the trade-in. And Charlie Henderson is here today to answer any questions related to that, but we kept that one in service, and we'll be using it in 2022 and maybe a few years beyond to assist with some projects that we might have to work on. So there's a difference of $6209 that will be funded through accumulated surplus and reserves in 2021. This was put into place in January of 2022, or into service in January of 2022. The second page there provides some options for you, obviously, to borrow this through MFA equipment financing, or not to approve the borrowing and look for other funding sources. Existing MFA equipment loans on page 2, so we had 4 in existence prior to this, and the second loan going through here tonight. So those are the ones there. They are 5-year terms. 2019 is the oldest one, so that'll come due in 2024. We've had 5 drop off this year as well. So we had 5 equipment loans that have dropped off. So we are cycling through them. We didn't do it on an annual basis, but obviously 5 years ago we had a number of pieces of equipment that we had bought.
It's probably when we hired Mr. Henderson, right?
Maybe just break over. So recommending 5 years, which is the maximum term for borrowing for this equipment financing. The costs, interest costs on this, it is at a rate of 0.79% currently. A 5-year term costs $57.39.92 in interest for the dump truck. If we were to shorten it to 4 years, we would save about $1,100 in interest charges.
We need a mover and a seconder. On 5 years?
5 years, sorry.
Okay, and that was Christopherson and Etcher. And who wants to speak to this first? Anybody? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. And the second one?
Yes, Mayor and Council. The second one here is a 2021 Vactor Hydrovac on a Freightliner truck chassis The amount that we had in our 2021 plan for borrowing on this was $500,000. The budget for it was $550,321, and the excess was to come out of reserves. The actual cost of the Hydrovac was $540,287.13. That's prior to trade-in. So we'll deal with the trade-in. There's a book value on the trade-in, and I believe it's fairly close to what the trade-in value is. But if it's different, there could be a loss or gain on that, and that'll show up in our financial statements in 2021. So that was put into service last summer, and I believe it was used a fair bit during flood response this year as well too. So again, the question is whether we go through MFA equipment financing for the $500,000 or look at other alternatives to financing for this piece of equipment. Same table on page 2. Interest charges for 5 years are $10,070.92 versus $8,093.42 on a 4-year term, the same 0.79% interest rate for these.
And I need a mover
Second.
and a seconder, so that's Etchart Luck. And a 5-year? Yes. And anyone want to speak to this? Yeah. Councillor White.
So the current back truck, what year is it?
The trade-in one was 2013 or 14 or something like that. I think it was a 2013 possibly. So it was about, I mean, they get a lot of use, those van trucks. That was probably about 8 years old.
Especially in the year of a flood.
And so, and the trade-in value?
The trade-in was $175,000.
That's not very much. Okay, thank you.
It's all relative. I'd take 175 for my vehicle.
Yeah, but does your vehicle suck? I mean.
And any other questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. You're now on, lost my place. Okay, maybe if I look at the agenda, it'd be much better off. 9.3, COVID-19 and flood economy recovery initiatives. Ms. Moore?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This report is regarding our COVID-19 economic recovery initiatives that were originally approved on the May 26, 2020 regular council meeting and extended on November 18th, 2020 council meeting to the end of December 31st, 2021. Over the past year, these initiatives met with varying degrees of success. The Shop Local program was in partnership with the Merritt District Chamber of Commerce, and they were able to leverage the initial support that the city provided and received a grant from the BC Chamber of Commerce just in December of this year for over $55,000 for a full promotional campaign. And it wasn't just advertising, it was developing content that they'll be able to use in the future. So great leveraging of our initial support there. Also, in collaboration with Merritt District Chamber and with our farmers market, last year we were able to hold one street market, which was quite successful. And due to other challenges, we only managed to hold the one, but we were really happy with that, and the public was also really happy to see that. So going forward into 2022, we're hoping to run these monthly from May through October, once per month. City staff have also been working closely over the past year with the Nicola Valley Community Arts Council on beautification projects, and ongoing plans are in the works. We're still talking about projects for street art and murals. So we have a few in the works that just didn't quite make it to the table last year, but we plan to move forward, and Nicola Valley Community Arts Council is still on board with those projects. The next two initiatives on the list, there's been a great uptake from businesses in the community. For the outdoor patios, we had 9 approved applications last year, which was a total of 2,754 waived permit fees. And with signed permits, we had 21 approved applications and total waived fees of $2,034. On the outdoor display of goods, we had increased interest from retailers during the times when we would hold a street market and the road was closed to vehicle traffic, and there would be sort of open doors to businesses, and they could have their products inside and out of their shop. But during regular business hours, when the traffic is on the street, there was less interest and more concern about watching over inventory. There's also several other initiatives that city staff have been working on to support economic recovery in our city, including Spirit Square improvements to attract residents and visitors and encourage people to spend more time in the city center. City center improvements such as parklets, bike parking, and beautification projects, public washrooms in the city center, and a couple of active transportation projects. One which we have funding for, actually 2 which we have funding for, not both in the city center, but one in the city center, providing access to the city center, and then the Diamondville Parkway, or Bikeway, not Parkway, Diamondville Bikeway is ready to go, should we be able to find funding for that one. There's a few options. We are recommending extension of the recovery initiatives to support economic recovery through 2022, but there's a few options there for extension and for your consideration, or you can choose not to extend the initiatives and receive the report for information.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Moore? I have one question. On the privately owned buildings in the city that we're putting murals on, what's to stop a new owner from painting over the mural? Do we have anything, any agreement, anything on title? And maybe I need somebody to tell me what how hard it is to put something on title.
There was some history around that, but I don't know all the detail.
Mr. MacArthur is willing.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, it's a challenging one because if you're to put a covenant on title, that of course may cause a problem for potential redevelopment of a particular building. So it's not an ideal solution. The best solution is actually to put a mural on a removable frame, but of course that increases the cost. So there's not a perfect solution there, but it really depends on funds and on whether we want to hinder potential future development of a particular site as well. So yeah, so that's sort of long story short.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think that Mayor and Council are aware that there's been a long history of murals, and there's been at times even some degree of contention regarding ownership and rights over those murals. And as it stands right now, there are parties that are still working to clarify that within the community. I think it is not the city's, they are the city's murals. It's but the one thing that I can conclusively say. There have been times where city funds have contributed to certain projects, but if the rights exist, they likely don't exist with the city, rather either with the society or artist or whatever that situation remains to be. So I know you're looking for a lot more specificity than what I just gave, but the city isn't going to be giving anybody advice in relation to any particular murals. They're going to need to make their own determination on the basis of pre-existing agreements. So,
Thank you. Councillor White?
I do know that, as you know, I had a building that had those murals on there, and on the one mural, there was an actual contract with the Elvis estate. As far as I know, that's the only one that couldn't be painted over. But when you talk about the cost of them being on the building, towards the end of the project, Michelle took and was painting removable, well, there were ones on the posts, but also I believe on somewhere on one of the buildings, they're on frames.
yeah, the Brooks and Dunn ones.
Yeah, and they were on a special metal type of something that, so it didn't, you can't tell. And at the time, she said it cost pretty much just as much to do that as it was to paint it on the building.
Okay.
So it wasn't a big, huge difference in.
Mr. Smith?
I just want to add for the benefit of council, because I think that there are two comments here. The challenge is anytime you have an agreement, if that agreement isn't registered on title, it's only binding on the person who entered into the agreement, and that really is the challenge, that it's wholly possible that there are agreements in some instances, but by the time you transfer it to somebody who transfers it to somebody, that doesn't hold unless it runs with the land, and you only get there by putting it on title. And so that's where Don is referring to a covenant, where there are ways of registering agreements. So it's not that this isn't possible. You totally can address these challenges. It's
easier with a frame.
A lot easier with a frame, and if it isn't, we would have to make a lot more provision as to stipulate at the outset who has rights over what and decision-making authority. And so it's something that we've been very mindful of, even with approaching murals that may end up being on frames. Clarifying that at the outset solves a lot of these concerns forever into the future. So great questions.
Thank you. Councillor White?
I think the agreements that were in place for those murals was just the okay from the building owner to be able to put them on there. Was the only agreements with it, and the city had to have. I know that the city required from their management or from. They had to have the okay from them in order to put them on the buildings. And the city did that. That was a city rule at the time.
Yeah, and we do have that on our sign permit forms. The building owner has to sign off on it. The buildings identified in this report, majority of them don't currently have anything on their walls. There is one not painted by the same artists that did most of the murals in town, and that's on the back of the Canadian Friendship Society building, and it needs to be redone. It's quite faded. And then there is one that is a current mural on the wall.
Okay, thank you. Did we make a motion on this to extend? May I have a mover that council extend the City of Merritt COVID-19 economic recovery initiatives to December 31st, 2022? Luck and Christopherson. Councillor Christopherson. No, you're on now.
Just regarding the murals, unless you've got some kind of a maintenance agreement, very often they end up with problems and who's allowed to touch them up and all of this. So I love murals, I think they're great, but
the city
they're problematic.
Yeah,
the city is.
Okay, Councillor Fair.
I think we've learned a lot from the experiences of the past with murals, and particularly that having removable ones is definitely the way to go, and I'd hate to see the difficulties of the past prevent us from beautifying the city now. So hopefully that's not a blockage for these.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Edgert.
So with the request to extend this, with the ask, is there money attached? Because the council extends the COVID-19 economic recovery initiatives to December, but is there a cost to us that we have to approve or something? Or is it just that, I mean,
I think Ms. Moore is saying she's already got the contracts, but they were past due. They should have been done last year. We didn't do them last year. We're looking at extending it for one more year
okay.
with the approval of the funding organization.
Yeah, the only financial implication is really the waived permit fees, which I think is really helpful to the businesses. We've appreciated it over the last year and however many months that was. So that's really the only loss to us, which is less than $5,000 last year. So.
Yeah, and for me, I guess I was just wondering what the downside would be. Like, what are we, other than small revenue?
Small revenue, that's our downside.
Okay, thank you for that.
Are we ready for the vote? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And just a reminder to business owners that sign permits and I guess the whole patio development, we need applications for permits. The application fee has been waived. The permits are not a cost for residents, but please come in and apply for a permit for both of these. I just got some bonus points with Mr. MacArthur. Okay, so now we're on to 9.4, ICIP Green Infrastructure Environmental Quality Program, Universal Water Metering, and that's Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we are looking to apply for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Green Infrastructure Environment Quality Program for Universal Water Metering. So as the city continues to grow, the water demand will increase. Merritt has implemented water conservation efforts since the early 90s through public education, public awareness, water restrictions through peak summer demand months. Water conservation efforts have led to a 43% decline in average water consumption per person from 2006 to 2019. In 2019, our average consumption was 242 liters. The provincial is 503, and the national is 427. Our only remaining kind of management tool is universal water metering. For this program to be successful, there is a public education component. We need to ensure residents understand the purpose and also its consequences. With the universal water metering, we're looking to reduce consumption. Capital utility upgrades can be deferred through leak control and consumer demand management, improved operational information, so data collection, faster bill payment, and as well limiting the slips, trips, and falls of somebody going to physically read meters. There was a survey conducted by Environment Canada. It found that unmetered municipalities average was 457 liters per person versus metered at 269 liters per person. There's several economic benefits, as mentioned, deferring capital and utility, construction costs, reduction in water consumption, less sewage going to the wastewater treatment plant as well. The estimated cost of this project is $3,526,814. The Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Green Infrastructure, announced 2 funding streams, and we've qualified for one, which would be our best stream, is the environment quality. There's also the Clean BC Communities Fund, and we didn't have a project that was ready for an application. Universal water main business case has been completed by WSP. That was submitted as part of the funding application, and it fits this funding stream. So this program will fund up to 73.33% of eligible costs of the project. Total cost of this project, as mentioned, was just over $3.5 million. Total contributions from the city, 26.67%, is $940,601.29. So WSP and myself and the engineering team, myself and Daniel, worked on this project for about the last 10 months. And I'll just give you kind of the Coles notes of the business case. So the background is, obviously the major benefits is to manage some of our municipal infrastructure, pumps or wells or reservoirs, and to mitigate high stress and expensive upgrades to these components. Water metering is basically a supply side management tool. We have assumed that there are just north of 2,400 water meters installed since the inception of this program in the mid-1990s. These water meters will require a retrofit, so we want to make them a radio frequency. The drivers and benefits for this project: reduction of water consumption, bringing our daily consumption below that, obviously the 500 liter per day. Surveys have suggested metering residents do consume, as mentioned before, that 269 liters per day. Equity, removal of the current flat rate structure at City Hall and move to a pay-by-use program. Economic benefits, obviously the capital upgrades that I spoke about, the utility information management, so that it really brings in a lot of data with this program, your peak hours, your daily demands, your average daily demands, your large volume users, as well as your leak detection. Environmental benefits, obviously the Coldwater River Basin, our aquifers, the fish, by reducing our water consumption. These will all be drivers. Meters themselves, we're at a great spot in technology. So these can be installed in pits at property line. They can also be installed in the house. There is, on the tech side of things, the direct read systems. They do require personnel to read the meters or a touchpad for them to be read. There's automatic meter reading, the AMR, which is completed by a driver, which could be the residential garbage truck or another city-owned vehicle, or it could be a person actually that is their kind of full-time or part-time job. Automatic meter infrastructure. So the radio acts kind of as a cell phone concept. It sends a signal out and is received by a base station or a collection point. Biggest challenges, negative public perception. The city will have support and guidance with experienced consultants, suppliers to help with outreach and education as part of their municipal implementation. The three scenarios that are being proposed in the business plan. One is to continue as the status quo. Two, which is the recommended, is full metering for single-family residential. And the number three is a voluntary metering program. With the voluntary, it basically will take up to 10 years to complete, and we are ineligible for grant funding under this current grant application. I'll just briefly go through the costs on page 24, I believe. Construction materials is just over $2.6 million. There is a contingency of just over $650,000. Design and engineering of just over $200,000. Project planning of 1 year of $52,000, and then reading costs of just over $1,200. And as mentioned, we're looking at that $3.5 million range for the project.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Anderson? Councillor Christopherson.
Yes, thank you. Well, initially, I really wasn't looking forward to water metering, but I am entirely convinced that it is the only way to responsibly manage an invaluable resource. I don't see any other way of doing it. We've tried many methods and convincing people ever since I've been in Merritt, and I think it's probably the only effective way that we will ever manage that resource. I am a little concerned about the wording, though. Recommendation that council directs staff to apply for investing in Canada infrastructure, and that council supports the project, which I do, and commits to any associated ineligible costs or overruns. And I'm just not sure if that means signing a blank check, or if there's another way of wording that so that you know, $3 or $4 million project doesn't all of a sudden mushroom up to 25 million, and we've made the commitment that we'll follow through. So I'm just wondering if the wording needs to be tweaked a little.
Mr. Smith.
Really, really astute observation. Unfortunately, I think Greg's actually probably pulling it up right now. But there's a separate spot that actually shows you the sample resolution.
Yeah.
That council at the bottom, this is kind of what they say. This is what you should be sending to us for our federal infrastructure grants. The last sentence you'll read that council board supports the project and commits to its share of X of the project as well as cost overruns. So what they're really saying is you are wearing the weight of this project. This is the amount that you apply for, and you're not getting more out of us. If it goes above that, it's your responsibility to manage this project to ensure that there aren't cost overruns. So what would end up happening is, as we go about this process, to give council some degree of comfort, we would put out an RFP for the implementation of this water metering program, because now we've got the report that backs it, but the implementation is a whole other beast. We have to start getting into the weeds, start looking at individual properties as to who has water meters, who only needs upgrades, who needs whole new ones. Oh, wait a sec, this one would need to be plumbed all together, this one probably needs a pit. What are the costs going to be? That isn't covered by this report, but what we're suggesting is that we apply for the grant, and if we end up being way off when it comes to putting out that RFP, somebody says, no, you're not doing this for anything less than $4.5 million, $5 million. When somebody says it closer, that we pump the brakes at that point, and don't get halfway down a project that's going to be more than you can bite off. Thankfully, with this particular one, the primary cost is the meter itself, which has a relatively fixed cost. And if you'll notice in 3.1, it was fairly gratuitous in its estimation. They functionally said that we're just going to treat it like there is no residence that currently has a meter, and price it as if every single one of those is going to need a new one. So many of those will only need upgrades, or some of them won't even. There will be different solutions depending on the age of those homes, but the cost probably won't be. Not every home is going to need the full meal deal solution. So just be an upgrade. So that isn't going to provide any degree of assurance that projects can't go over. Like anything else, you have to manage it, but they're just saying they're not responsible, and really we kind of have to have that in there, otherwise they just say no. Not satisfying.
No, I knew that our staff would be like a hawk and making sure that the city isn't left open. But the wording of it is
All
they'll take care of it.
All city staff have developed Hawkeyes. Mr. Smith, did you want
I just wanted to add one other
to, and Councillor Richard?
element that Charlie did raise in his report, and I actually want to apologize to council and to the public if it's necessary. Recognize that this is a really, really uncomfortable time to be bringing this forward to council. As Charlie indicated, the ball on this got started long before any floods, and if we had the opportunity to pivot to an alternative project that we could have still made the grant deadline and had all of the necessary engineering and other components done in order to support that application, we happily would have recommended another project to you. We're bringing it forward now because we don't have another alternative. This is the date that we've been prepping for a number of months now, and the project that we had been prepping for it. So I recognize that in light of the devastation that our communities face, this might look and appear insensitive. We've chosen to bring it forward in spite of that because this is the project that we have available, and I want to apologize if that puts you in an uncomfortable position because we know people are hurting. We know that talking about water meters isn't sexy at the best of times, and this isn't the best of times. And so I think that it's still absolutely worthy of consideration, but I do want to acknowledge that.
And to put that in perspective as well, that the funding pots for us to be able to do emergency repair on our city is not this funding pot, it's completely separate. And this is the one that is available to us. The other one is as well, I hope. It's just, it's an entirely different pot of funds. Councillor Etchard.
Well, I am very interested in conserving water, and I like seeing the stats. When I look at some of these things about, like on section 3, where it's talking about houses built before 1993 don't have any water meters, that a lot of these houses would have to be retrofit. I'm thinking mostly of places like Pine Street, where all the houses are built way before 1990, well, not all, but most. And trying to work on this program right now, where a lot of these people's homes are destroyed, is a problem. And then I'm thinking about a lot of other neighborhoods where I can only imagine where you have to dig a pit. The level of work is a lot. Like, I can only imagine some of these houses with slab construction or crawl spaces which are inaccessible. Like, this will be quite an undertaking. I'm thinking this program, like, would the homeowner then be responsible for getting the plumber in, or would it be a city program to do? Like, this makes me nervous because of the level of work that a lot of the homes would have to retrofit. So this concerns me a lot.
I think that fair to be concerned. There's 2 points that I'd like to make with that. The application is happening in 2022, but this project needs to be completed by year-end 2026. Realistically, this is definitely it's not a project that happens this year because you don't usually get funding for ICIP projects until the following year, which probably slates this by the time you have consultation and like an RFP goes out, you have consultation. You still have to develop the implementation plan, which you'll note this doesn't include the kind of level of detail of who is going to administer what. Is it going to be private contractors? Is it going to be the city? For those homes where you can't get at them easily or replumbing is required, is there an additional level of subsidy or whatnot? What does this actually look like? There's a whole lot of planning that comes around this before that, and recognize that if you don't have those answers now, that's because it's just not the stage this is at. This is the, can we theoretically get some funds for this? If it is a thumbs up, then we go out, we get somebody to really design that level of answer for it. Because as it stands right now, nobody wants to put the time into designing a program where costs could change if it's not ultimately going to get funded.
Councillor, I'm going to go to Councillor Luck for the first time.
Thank you, Mayor. We're just in the question period still, right? We're not in debate yet? We're still
We have a
question,
mover
right?
and a seconder.
Do we have a
We
mover
were
and
in
second
debate.
already? I missed that, sorry. Okay, well, I got a
Do I
question.
have a mover and a seconder?
If you did, Your Worship, I didn't record it.
I think you're still in question period.
Still a question.
Okay,
Still question
maybe,
period, yeah, just wanted to
maybe
confirm
I
that.
don't. So we are still only on question.
Okay, so I have a
Sorry.
couple of questions for Mr. Henderson. So the 3.5 million, because if everybody, as Councillor Etcher was pointing out, personally, I don't want a water meter in my house. I would want it at property line. So is this estimate included? If everybody in the city said property line, would that cost cover all the installations of property line?
No, so I think those are options that'll be put forth. There may be a cost sharing program for people that would want them at property line. There is kind of multiple things that you need to incorporate, or climate, insulation.
Right.
So as we move forward down to the construction stage, those will really be rolled out. But we have spoken about the cost sharing item.
Okay, so we couldn't build that into the cost for our grant ask to anticipate 50% of the residents in the city would want them by property line or something
So
like that?
at this point, we are applying for 1.3% of the total grant. So we didn't incorporate the pits, as those are much more expensive.
Yeah, they are.
So to balance our grant application and construction costs, this is the path we've chosen.
Okay, all right. That was one of my questions. I forgot the other one now that was good. Okay, I'll think of it later. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Fair, did you have a question? Okay. Okay, now I'm looking for, we have no other questions. I'm looking for a mover. White Christopherson. And now councillors are free to debate. Councillor Christopherson.
Yes,
Yeah. And then Fair.
I understand the points about that we're still recovering, which is a huge issue in itself, but we still need to look to the future. We still need to safeguard our water use. We can't continue on as we have been in the past, so understanding that safeguards regarding the costs will be looked at very strenuously by our staff. I'm prepared to make the motion as written.
And Councillor Fair.
Thank you. I'm in favor of this motion. I think it's been a long time coming, and you can't argue with the results that we've seen all over the province. And I think it's just time to get the ball rolling, so I'm happy to see this moving forward.
Councillor Luck.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, first of all, I'm just going to state once again that I do not like water meters, but it is the right thing to do. There's no question about that as we look at other communities around here with water and that. And as you sit on this side of the room and as a councillor, and you look at what it cost us to build infrastructure, maintain infrastructure, increase infrastructure, water filtration, all those things, storage, all that, the costs are just skyrocketing. And this is one way to be able to get those costs as a taxpayer, as a councillor here, council, to get those costs under control. There is no question about that. In another respect too, and I sympathize with what's been said here about it, it's never a good time to do some of these things anyway. And it's going to take there's going to see some major lead time in this thing. So that's going to help us through some of this tough time. And it's an ugly thing to do. There's no question about that. But you know, at the end of the day, this is the fair and equitable thing to do. You know, when you sit there and watch your neighbor leave his tap on all day, running water, that's adding cost to everybody in this city. And infrastructure costs, as we've talked about and everything. It's the fair and equitable thing for everybody to do in here. Every other city is doing that. And I think, I could be wrong at this, but I think one day the provincial government is going to step in and say, look, if you don't have water meters and you're not working towards bringing the water consumption down in this province, you can forget grants in the future. And that's one of my fears as well. And I've heard rumors that they might want to do that. So if we're not on board with all this and we're not in line with the provincial government, we could be in trouble down the road too. I'm not for sure, but I've heard some rumors that way. So I think it is the right thing to do. And by the time we get things up and running, like Councillor Christopherson, I think the timing should be pretty good on this. So thanks.
Councillor Etcher.
I can appreciate needing to conserve water and all the measures that we have to be concerned with. I just think that we have a lot of questions for the residents because some of the older homes will have a lot of work to do, and I think the concern will be how much is this going to cost and how will they come up with it. I know for a lot of people, if they're on a fixed income, the concern is what's this going to cost me, and these are the tough questions that we have to answer for some of these people. Nobody is arguing that water conservation is important because we know that, but it's the high costs, and you know, right now we have utilities that come out twice a year, so then would we have that reduced on our utility billings and then have a separate water bill which is based on use, which is fine. Then some people who leave their taps on will maybe decide to shut them off a little sooner, and you'll find leak detection a lot sooner by maybe an appliance that's leaking or something. But that's the only concern, is that if we go with something like this, we're going to have a lot of questions that people are going to ask that we don't have the answer to, and this is the only thing I'm worried about. Not everybody here maybe is impacted with this. Maybe they don't own an older building or whatever the case may be, but there's a lot of questions that people ask, and we'll have questions coming at us, so I just think we need to be prepared for that too. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree in the sense that there's a lot of water metering fears out there in the community, and we've got a few years to educate the public. And I understand that's part of the program as well as the education, and it's so needed. And we're at the very beginning stages, and we need the grant in order to take us through the education stage. So it's kind of a catch-22. But I agree, it's a program that is needed. And Mr. Smith, you wanted?
I was just going to say, the business case for these, and ours actually didn't get into it to the same level as some of the other business cases that other communities have done. But of course, if you're looking at this from a 1 or a 2 year time horizon, this actually will probably be more expensive for individuals. When you factor something over a longer time horizon with the reduced costs for water systems and what that does for taxation generally, these tends to be a money-saving tool for residents unless you are an extremely high water user. And so I think that this science doesn't really back up this being like an egregious cost on communities over a longer time horizon. We recognize that there can be some real pinch points for individuals, and that's why it's so important that you get the rollout of this as close to right as possible to minimize those upfront costs for people. And that's where I think that, again, your concern is really more around the implementation, Adam, and I think that you've hit it, that we need to do as good a job as possible on that. We're not going to be able to address every concern. I'm not going to pretend that that'll happen. But one, I think that you guys have, around this table, discussed very well the idea of moving for kind of pay for service. You get something, you pay for it, it's not nonsensical. There's a good degree of logic to that. And we just need to make sure that if that's the direction that we go, if the grant funding is there to support it, that we try our best to make that rollout as smooth as possible for residents in that transition.
Councillor Luck.
Yeah, so this grant's going to come in from, and start. Is there any way we could start the, as I call it, WaterWise program or some program like that sooner than later? Is there something we can start doing to start ramping it? Because the sooner the public starts understanding this and looking at this, the better they'll feel when it finally comes time, I think, for implementation. Is there anything we can do to ramp that up sooner, Mr. Smith? Or Mr. Henderson?
I think, you know, when we talk about our water restrictions as well, you know, we've really kind of ramped those up, and the data supports that in the last 3 years. However, you are seeing us starting to plateau. So unfortunately, I think this is the time, and I do really recognize this is a very sensitive time for the community to bring this forward, but also given that lag time, that will really help with the public engagement, the public education, as well as bringing some expertise on board as well through consultants and suppliers, and I think that is really key. It was mentioned in the business case about Neptune and Rock Creek as well, and they really had some negative feedback in that community as well, and really worked their education piece. So I think it is a good time to start that piece, but unfortunately we have to apply for the grant to be able to do that. Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah, just one point on the meters themselves. When they do get implemented, many communities will do a mock bill. So you'll get your regular flat rate bill, and you'll get a mock bill based on your water consumption for a number of periods. So then you can see what the impact would be when you move to a rate structure. So if you go to the Grand Forks website, they implemented this and they use that mock billing as well. So that's one way to, you're not hit with that bill immediately. You've got a period of time to adjust your water usage.
Mr. Smith.
I wanted to add as well that at this point, Council hasn't made any decisions to proceed with any form of water metering program firmly. Previously there was a resolution to explore it, which is what led to this business case. Now we're putting forward the actual grant application. But if there is a desire to start kind of consulting with the community as to what we can do, what does implementation need to look like in order for people to feel like this is fair and equitable. Of course, if the desire is for this to have zero cost and other things, like there's some things we won't be able to make happen with that, but there's feedback that we can gather in terms of implementation. But I think that you're really just looking at, again, more continued sharing of statistics and information that would help soften the transition to water.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. And now we go to our late item agenda piece that is 9.5. And whose is this? This EOC. Who's bringing this forward? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to acknowledge, in particular, our emergency program coordinator, Krista Menara, as being the person who put all of the work into this particular application, so I'm not taking any of the credit for her good work. That being said, I'm happy to speak to it. So this is an opportunity through the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. This has been a fairly regular annual opportunity that the city has been successful with in the past. To continually increase and improve our Emergency Operations Center capability. This application is obviously very tailored this year, given the experience that we had with both activating our Emergency Operations Center for the fire, but most especially the floods. And so you'll see that roughly 10,000 of that 25,000 is training for personnel. Within our Emergency Operations Center. We undergo regular training as it stands, but having the costs of that training paid for is a huge opportunity to take some pressure off of our Merritt taxpayers to get that necessary training and to keep us current or to further specialize in various roles. About the other 15,000 of it is again more shortfalls or things that we identified. So we ran a much larger Emergency Operations Center this year than we ever historically had, and little things like we didn't have anywhere near enough tinnies or other things to be able to identify individuals. And so little things like that can break down the chaos and help you be more organized in that moment. So some advanced preparation there. Again, some more technology, even things as simple as whiteboards, because again, we started the operation in this council chambers and we had sufficient whiteboards there, but when it moved over and got to a size where we needed to be at the Civic Center, didn't have as many whiteboards readily available. So looking at simple things like that on top of portable projector for breakout rooms. Turned out to be something that would have been beneficial in that moment. Found solutions, but these are items, and then additional laptops, as those were difficult to procure when we had this many extra people coming in to support. So that's what this application is for, and if council is in support of it, we will get that off, and I have a high degree of belief we would be successful in this application.
Any questions for staff?
Call it us.
We need a mover.
Second.
Christopherson and White, and the motion is to apply for grant at the beginning.
So the motion is put up on the screen.
It's on the screen.
Next. Oh,
I think the late agenda is on that.
It's in the
Late, we didn't put the motion forward today.
oh yeah.
Do you want me to read it? I thought it
Can you read it? There it is.
recommend that council direct staff to apply for funding to support further EOC training and equipment through the CEPF Emergency Operations Centers and Training Stream, and that council indicates support for the proposed grant activities and its willingness to provide overall grant management.
And mover and seconder was Christopherson White. And I apologize, I didn't pull up the new agenda, so I was looking at the old agenda. Staff did have it ready. So, mover and seconder debate. Councillor Fair.
I just want to say that I support this application, and I think it's excellent that staff have recognized what can be improved. But I also want to say, or just give a thank you to all those who operated the EOC in the past. Your contributions are much appreciated, and you deserve to be recognized for that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and let's deal with this and then go with that deserve to be recognized point afterwards. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, none, carried. I like the idea of being able to do something from council to staff to say thank you. I don't know what that is, I don't know what that would entail, but can we think about it? And come back with some kind of an idea for next time? Because I think it's worthwhile. They gave it their all, they were working way beyond an ordinary work week. Sometimes even more than double the ordinary work week. I mean, this was, and families were affected as well. They did this, well, their families had to take care of family business. So there's a lot of recognition that I think it would behoove us to do something for staff. Councillor Christopherson.
I fully support that, because I don't really believe that our community as a whole really understands how much work was done, was necessary, was painful, but I think our staff, Public Works, everyone that works so hard deserve to be recognized for the supreme effort that was put in. We had 5,000 people that could come home early compared to what could have happened. And although our hearts are very much with the ones that are still struggling, still have a long ways to go, our city would not be back in operations, able to plow snow, drink the water, without the fantastic effort that staff went through. At great cost to themselves, I think. So I fully support anything we can do to say thank you and to get that out into the public.
Yeah. And I've heard that over and over again from Emergency BC, and many other levels of government, that the speed with which we brought the individuals back was phenomenal. And yeah, it was. Mr. Smith.
I can say on behalf of staff, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I have one special request of anything you do, make sure it's free. Whatever you do, make sure it's free. We've got a tight budget this year, the best year, and if it's going to go, we want it to go back to citizens. So if you're going to give us kudos, recognition, we love it. We are absolutely happy if that comes in the form of thank you or some special way, however you'd like to do that. But for everybody around this table, we'll all feel better about it if there isn't dollars spent on that. Thank you. There's my request.
Not a dollar. Mr. Anderson, you have to come to our defense here.
That's a hallmark training and well.
We're going to find Sean up in Back Valley.
Okay. So, notice of motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Councillor Christopherson, did you have?
I said my piece. I just forgot to turn it off.
Notices of motion.
Oh, lights in the back alley.
No.
And reports from council.
Sounds like we might need some lights in the back alley.
And information items, 12.1, Association of Farmers Market. There was a request in there that we send a letter to them of thank you, or thanking the program. We send this to the Minister of Health, Adrian Dix. So was there a desire to do that?
Yeah, very good. I don't need a motion for that, or staff can just...
Motions are good.
Yeah.
Motion,
Okay.
yeah.
Easy
Need
as
a
to
motion.
that.
So Luck and
Yeah, I will-
Christopherson. And all in favor? Approved. Opposed, none. Approved. So that brings us to the end of our meeting. The meeting is now terminated.